The millionaire's baby refused to eat until the poor maid cooked something no one expected. Dawn in New England usually arrived gently, but that morning the pale sunlight couldn't cut through the heavy velvet drapes of the Hawthorne estate, a grand Georgian mansion resting silently on a fog-covered hill. The house was magnificent, yes, but it carried a thick, unmoving sorrow, as if the very air refused to shift. It wasn't the weather. It was grief. Ethan Hawthorne paced across his vast home office like a breathing shadow. Once a handsome man with a commanding presence, the kind that graced magazine covers, he was now only a hollow outline of himself. His deep-set eyes were bruised with sleepless nights, and in his hand he held a cup of cold coffee he hadn't touched. Across from him, Dr. Keller, the state's most respected pediatrician, carefully placed his stethoscope back into his leather case. Even his usually calm features were drawn with helplessness. "Ethan," Dr. Keller said, voice low and heavy. "I have to be honest. Liam has no physical illness, no infection, no virus, no obstruction. His tests are completely normal." Ethan slammed his palm onto the walnut desk. The crack of sound sliced through the stillness like a gunshot. "Look at my son," he growled, voice fracturing. "He hasn't eaten a proper meal in 2 weeks. He's shrinking. He's skin and bones. You call that normal?" Dr. Keller inhaled deeply, removed his glasses, and set them down. "Liam is experiencing severe attachment grief," he said slowly. "He misses his mother. The bond was broken too early when your wife passed during childbirth. Children like him sometimes stop eating because they give up." Ethan's shoulders collapsed, drained of all strength. His wife's name, Anna, shattered in his mind like glass dropped onto stone. Dr. Keller continued, "Liam isn't rejecting food. He's rejecting a life without her. What he needs is connection, warmth, human contact, not medication." Ethan sank into his chair and covered his face with both hands. He didn't cry, but his whole body trembled. "Go," he whispered, voice strangled. "If you can't cure him, go." Dr. Keller wanted to say more, but no words could reach Ethan now. He left quietly, leaving the father drowning in silent despair. Upstairs, the mansion was painfully still. The giant fireplaces, long corridors lined with ancestral portraits, the candles that had never been lit. Everything resembled a museum of sorrow. Only one sound broke the suffocating quiet, the faint, exhausted breathing of a child too tired to cry. Liam Hawthorne, just 1 year old, lay in his crib. His eyes were half open, unfocused. His thin arm rested limply over a blue blanket. His pajamas were loose, hanging on a body that no longer fought. He hadn't reached out for anyone in days. He did not laugh, did not cry, did not ask for food. A dangerous, eerie stillness. The emptiness of the house echoed, as if even the stone walls were mourning. In the far wing inside the kitchen, the only warm room left, Mrs. Thompson, the elderly housekeeper who had served the Hawthorne family for over 30 years, was stirring a pot of soup for the staff. She looked up toward the ceiling, toward where Liam lay. Her eyes were full of fear. She knew the truth. If the child didn't start eating again soon, they would bury another soul in this family. The office door swung open. Ethan stepped out, pale and hollow. He didn't look at anyone, didn't speak. He simply walked up the stairs toward the darkness where his son fought each fragile breath. And inside that cold mansion, the gray morning sky was merely a warning, a prelude to the storm that had yet to come. On the quiet edge of town, someone was already walking toward that storm. Morning in Hawthorne Ridge carried the faint chill of winter, thin as the mist drifting over the damp cobblestone streets. The red maple trees stood silent, motionless, as if the whole town was holding its breath. And amid that quiet beauty, a young woman stood at the back gate of the Hawthorne estate, gripping the strap of her worn canvas bag, trying to steady the heartbeat pounding too loudly in her chest. Natalie Brooks had practiced her greeting all night. It still didn't feel right. Her sweater was frayed at the cuffs, her jeans were faded, her sneakers stained with dried mud. But she had done everything she could to look neat. Her brown hair was tied into a simple bun, her face washed clean, her amber eyes bright with a fragile kind of hope. That hope was the only thing she owned that no one could take away. She needed this job, desperately. The thought alone tightened her throat. Her father had been in the hospital for weeks, and the bills were rising like a tide, threatening to swallow her family whole. Her part-time job at the school barely covered groceries, let alone medicine. If she failed today, she didn't want to imagine the consequences. She pressed the doorbell. The gate opened with a dry, metallic sound, revealing Mrs. Thompson, the estate's elderly housekeeper, solid-built and stern, her silver hair pinned tightly behind her head. Her eyes, sharp as blades, swept over Natalie from head to toe, missing nothing. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice devoid of warmth. I'm Natalie Brooks. The staffing agency sent me. I'm here for the morning housekeeping shift." Mrs. Thompson neither nodded nor smiled. "You're 2 minutes late." "I'm sorry, the bus—" "In this house," she cut sharply, "we don't blame circumstances. You're either on time or you leave." Natalie bowed her head. "Yes, ma'am, I understand." Mrs. Thompson turned on her heel. "Follow me." Natalie stepped inside and was immediately swallowed by an unusual heaviness. The mansion was grand and meticulously kept, yet it felt cold, as if every fireplace had been extinguished long ago. The scent of old wood, wool carpets, and unmoving silence pressed down on her like a weight. Every step she took echoed faintly along the long hallway, as though replying from a house that no longer wished to speak. The housekeeper walked ahead, her voice firm and even. "There are 3 rules here. First, work silently. No staring, no eavesdropping, no questions. Second, avoid Mr. Hawthorne at all times. If he enters a room, you exit. He does not like to be disturbed. Third, you never, ever go upstairs. That is the private floor of the master and the child. You are not permitted there. Understood?" Natalie blinked but nodded quickly. "Yes, ma'am." "No curiosity," Mrs. Thompson added. Natalie swallowed her anxiety. She wanted to do well. She needed to be trusted, to keep this job. The housekeeper led her to the staff area, showed her the lockers, apron, broom, and schedule. Natalie changed swiftly, then began cleaning the living room floor with careful, quiet movements. Everything seemed to settle into routine until a faint sound drifted from above. A small whimper, thin as a thread, so faint she thought she imagined it. Not a typical baby cry. It carried exhaustion, like someone too tired to keep fighting. Natalie looked up. Her heart tightened. She didn't know what was happening in that room, but the sound held a kind of despair no one should ignore. "Keep cleaning," Mrs. Thompson's voice suddenly snapped from behind, making Natalie drop the cloth in her hands. "Do not pay attention to things that are not yours to worry about." But the fragile whimper lingered, calling to her, pleading. And in that moment, Natalie sensed that whatever waited upstairs would alter the course of her life, even if she didn't yet know how. The faint whimper from upstairs lingered in Natalie's mind even as she bent down to continue scrubbing the floor. It carried the weight of a sadness far too heavy for such a small child to bear. Even after Mrs. Thompson's footsteps faded into another hallway, Natalie's heartbeat couldn't settle. She tried to focus on her work, but every creak in the ceiling, every whisper of wind against the window, made her think of the child upstairs needing someone, anyone, to listen. She had just begun convincing herself that it wasn't her place when Mrs. Thompson's voice cut through the quiet from the living room doorway. "Brooks, upstairs," she said, sharp but tinged with an odd tension. "The bathroom on the 2nd floor needs cleaning. Move quickly." Natalie froze, her heart jolting in her chest. The 2nd floor? The forbidden floor? She didn't know why the rule suddenly changed, but she didn't dare question it. She removed her apron and followed the housekeeper up the wide staircase, each step filling her with heavier dread. The hallway above was quieter than the first floor, its cream-colored carpet washed in pale window light that somehow made it feel colder. The bathroom door stood open. Thompson pointed inside. "Clean fast, then come down," she instructed before turning away. "And remember, do not enter the child's room." When the door closed behind her, the sound that met Natalie was not the drip of a faucet or the sigh of wind. It was a child's cry, not the sharp wail of a hungry baby, but the scattered, choking remnants of crying too long, too hard. Then came a woman's voice, harsh and impatient. "Oh my God, shut up already. I said shut up, just eat. What is so hard about that?" Natalie's whole body stiffened. A chill shot down her back. That was not the voice of someone caring for a child. It was the voice of someone irritated, trapped, venting frustration on a fragile life. She opened the bathroom door a crack. The hallway was empty. Her pulse thundered in her ears as she crept toward the sound. The nursery door was slightly ajar, enough for her to see inside, and what she saw made her eyes burn. A young woman, surely the nanny, sat slouched in a chair, dressed in tight clothes, her bright red nails tapping against her phone screen. Liam's blanket was tossed aside. The baby lay in his crib with a flushed, exhausted face, his eyes swollen from crying. A tray of industrial, thick, cold baby food sat next to him, untouched. The nanny had made no effort to feed him. She had simply set it down and ignored him entirely. "God, why do you cry so much?" she muttered, still glued to her phone. "If the guy paid me more, maybe I'd bother. But for this wage? Cry yourself to sleep." Natalie covered her mouth, suppressing a gasp. She had never witnessed something so careless, so cruel, toward someone so defenseless. And then Liam turned his head, his red, watery eyes searching the room as if hoping someone, anyone, might care enough to look back. Natalie couldn't stand still any longer. She pushed the door open a little wider and stepped inside, moving quietly as if any sudden sound might deepen the child's pain. When she reached the crib, Liam lifted a trembling hand toward her. Natalie reached out instinctively, and the tiny fingers closed around hers instantly, gripping with every last ounce of strength he had. That small, desperate touch slammed into Natalie's chest like a cold blade. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, without meaning to. But the nanny suddenly whipped her head around. "Hey, what are you doing in here?" she snapped, shooting to her feet. Natalie recoiled, pulling her hand back as if she had touched fire. Liam's fingers slipped from hers, his already teary eyes widening in panic. Natalie wanted to explain, to scoop him up, to do anything, but her instinct screamed that she had to get out before being accused of something worse. She backed out of the room, heart hammering, then hurried down the stairs. By the time she reached the kitchen, her legs were shaking. She gripped the edge of the counter, trying to steady her breath. The warmth of Liam's tiny hand still lingered on her skin, and the guilt sliced through her chest. She had left him there in the hands of someone who did not see him as a human being. All that afternoon, the image of Liam's tiny hand gripping Natalie's finger replayed in her mind like a desperate plea refusing to fade. Even while she scrubbed pans, even while she wiped the stainless counters, even as the kitchen clock ticked steadily, she still felt those swollen, tear-filled eyes staring into her, trembling, silent, aching. Natalie inhaled shakily to keep her throat from closing. No child cried like that unless something was terribly wrong. She had cared for dozens of cousins back home, fevers, colic, teething, but she had never seen a look that pierced her heart the way Liam's had. When she opened the refrigerator to check the contents, her gaze stopped at a few simple ingredients. Milk, oats, vanilla. Things no one in this mansion ever cared to use, yet to her. Those were the ingredients of the warm porridge her mother cooked during cold nights in their old house. Gentle, sweet, soft. A meal that wrapped itself around a child like a hug. The thought touched her heart so quickly it felt like breath. Part of her mind protested. You're not allowed to use the family's food. You can't cook anything unassigned. But Liam's hoarse crying, the nanny's harsh scolding, and the bruised, swollen eyes of that small boy made something inside her ignite. Natalie glanced around. The kitchen was empty. Her hands moved on their own, retrieving a small pot, pouring milk, adding oats. The scent of vanilla dissolved into the warmth rising from the stove, drifting across the marble counters, softening the kitchen's cold edges. It slipped into the quiet halls like a thin blanket, breathing life into a place that felt dead. She stood still, letting the aroma fold around her, imagining it cradling Liam, tiny, cold, forgotten in that vast room upstairs. She poured the porridge into a small bowl, wrapped it in a cloth to keep warm, and held the tray to her chest as if carrying her entire resolve with it. Every step up the staircase felt like stepping on blades. But the fear of losing her job meant nothing now. Once she stood before Liam's door, her hands no longer trembled. The room's dimness made the boy appear even smaller. Liam lay on his side, breath thin and fragile. Natalie set the tray down and lifted him gently. He was so light it nearly broke her heart. "Hey, sweetheart, I brought something for you," she whispered, her voice soft as mist. She scooped a tiny spoonful, blew on it, touched it to his lips. Liam flinched, worn out from being force-fed. But when the warm drop touched his mouth, he froze. His lips quivered. His tongue brushed the sweetness. Then, slowly, his eyes opened, as if sunlight slipped through a long-closed window. He parted his lips. A breath escaped Natalie, a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Second spoon. Third. Liam kept eating, small determined bites, as though the warmth was pulling him back from the edge. Color crept into his cheeks. His breathing steadied. His small body softened in her arms. After finishing half the bowl, Liam leaned against her chest, just a little heavier, like life had been poured back into him. Natalie held him and sat in the rocking chair. His warm breath brushed her collarbone, trusting and calm. She kissed his soft hair. "I'm here now. You're safe." The door flew open. Natalie jolted. Ethan Hawthorne stood in the doorway, panic etched across his face, his gaze locked on Liam sleeping in her arms. "What are you doing with my son?" His voice cracked like thunder. Natalie stood instantly, still holding Liam. I was only helping. Give him to me!" Ethan yanked the boy from her, his hands shaking. "What did you feed him? Who do you think you are?" He stopped. In Ethan's arms, Liam stirred. His eyelids fluttered open, and then a tiny smile bloomed on his lips. He looked at Natalie. Ethan froze, his voice barely a whisper. "Liam, you're smiling?" Silence filled the room, as if the entire mansion had paused to understand the miracle of Liam's tiny smile. Ethan remained frozen, his arms wrapped around his son, while his eyes stayed fixed on Natalie. Confusion, astonishment, and something almost like hope flickering in them. A feeling he might have forgotten since the day Anna died. For a moment, no one spoke. Only Liam's steady breathing softened the air. When the boy burrowed into his father's chest, Ethan's hands trembled before he bent down and pressed a shaky kiss onto the soft hair, needing to confirm that his son was still truly there. "He ate?" he whispered, as if afraid the truth might vanish. Natalie nodded softly. "Yes, vanilla oat porridge. I made it for him." A complicated emotion crossed Ethan's face, not anger, not even relief, but the quiet guilt of a father who had been too desperate to see the obvious answer right in front of him. The next morning, as Natalie entered the kitchen, she heard raised voices in the hallway. Yesterday's nanny, pale and startled, stood before Ethan. His voice was not loud, yet cold enough to chill bone. "You won't be returning here." "But Mr. Hawthorne, You neglected my son," he interrupted firmly. "There is nothing left to discuss." The nanny stormed out, her heels striking the wooden floor like nails sealing the coffin of her job. Natalie stood still, heart pounding, unsure what this meant for her. Ethan turned toward her. This time his gaze was calmer, wearier. A raw kind of exhaustion, stripped of the icy armor he usually wore. "Natalie," he said, his voice low but gentler than before, "from today on, you won't be doing housekeeping anymore." Her chest tightened. "Are you letting me go?" Ethan shook his head, slow, deliberate. "No, I want you to take care of Liam. Completely." He looked down at his sleeping son. "He needs you, more than anyone here." The words rooted Natalie to the floor. She never imagined someone like Ethan could speak to her with such sincerity. "But why me?" she whispered. Ethan inhaled, searching for the courage to say what weighed on him. Because for the first time in months, he smiled. And he only smiles when you're near him. In that moment, standing in the dim morning hallway, something soft and fragile passed between them, like a tiny crack forming in the thick ice around both their hearts. The days that followed passed with a strange, unfamiliar peace. Peace that had been absent from the mansion for months. Liam ate, slept, and even smiled at times, and with every tiny smile, Ethan's eyes softened in a way Natalie had never seen. She didn't dare think she was important, yet simply holding the child each day, feeling his warm breath against her shoulder, was enough to fill her chest with quiet warmth. That peace lasted until one late afternoon when the front door swung open with a sharp echo. A gust of cold air swept in, followed by the crisp click of high heels. Veronica Hale, Ethan's longtime girlfriend, entered the house as though it belonged to her alone. Tall, beautiful, polished, expensive perfume trailing behind her. Her blonde hair curled perfectly, her fitted coat pristine, her smile sharp like a blade wrapped in velvet. She looked like she belonged at charity galas, not bent over a child. Ethan descended the stairs with Liam in his arms, just as Veronica stepped into the foyer. She lit up instantly. "Ethan, I thought you were still in your lab." Then she pretended to notice Liam. "Oh, hello, little one." She bent down, but instead of picking him up, she merely tapped 2 fingers gently against his hand. When she noticed a bit of porridge on his shirt, her expression faltered with visible disgust. "Oh dear, he's covered in food. Who's caring for him?" Before Ethan could respond, Natalie appeared from the hallway, carrying a wipe and a bottle. Veronica's gaze snapped to her, lingering as though Natalie was a stain on a silk rug. "Oh," Veronica said, her smile twisting. "Her?" Her eyes scanned Natalie's plain sweater, faded pants, and simple shoes, judgment dripping from her look. Ethan sensed it immediately. "Veronica," he said, calm but firm, "Natalie saved him. She's taken very good care of Liam." The smile on Veronica's lips froze, then faded entirely. Her eyes darkened, hard as marble. "I see," she replied, though her honeyed tone couldn't hide the blade beneath. "I just didn't think you'd let someone like that near your son." Natalie lowered her gaze, but her chest tightened painfully. Ethan met Veronica's eyes for a long moment. "I trust her," he said clearly. 3 simple words, but enough to spark a sharp flame of jealousy in Veronica's eyes. She smiled again, thin and dangerous as a tightening cord. "Well then, I suppose I'll be paying closer attention to everything," she said. And in that moment, Natalie felt it unmistakably. The fragile peace she had brought into this home was about to be crushed by someone who didn't tolerate threats, real or imagined. The days after Veronica's return grew suffocating. Natalie felt something shifting in the air, like an invisible string slowly tightening. Every time she held Liam, every time the little boy reached for her, Veronica's eyes narrowed just slightly, enough for Natalie to understand that the woman was waiting for something, or planning something far worse. That night, the mansion fell into deep silence, lit only by dim hallway lamps and the wind scraping against glass. After Natalie put Liam to sleep in the small crib beside Ethan's bed, she returned to the staff quarters, unaware that just down the hall, Veronica was standing motionless before the glass cabinet in Ethan's study. She opened it, her gloved hand brushing the polished wooden box. When she lifted the lid, warm light revealed a finely crafted silver antique watch, one of the few belongings Ethan kept after his father passed. Veronica lifted it, letting it catch the light, her cold smile flashing like the edge of a blade. "So precious, which makes it perfect for ending this," she whispered. She slipped through the quiet corridors to the staff area. Natalie's worn canvas bag sat inside a small locker, harmless, simple, painfully vulnerable. Veronica opened it, dropped the watch deep inside, letting it sink to the bottom like a final sentence to an undeserved fate. "Good luck, if you even get any," she murmured before walking away. The next morning, the sky was a heavy sheet of gray. Ethan summoned all staff to the foyer, his voice tight as a pulled wire. "My father's watch is missing," he said, eyes red with anger and sleeplessness. "I saw it last night." Natalie stood at the end of the line, holding Liam, her heartbeat thudding violently. Veronica tilted her head, her voice deliberately hesitant. "Ethan, I saw someone near your study last night. I didn't want to say anything, but maybe we should check everyone's bags." Ethan nodded without question. Bag after bag was brought forward. Then Natalie's turn. She placed her bag on the table, hands trembling. A houseman reached inside. 1 second later, a sharp metallic clink split the silence. The silver watch rolled out, spinning once before lying still for all to see. The room froze. Natalie stared as though watching a nightmare take physical form. "No, this isn't mine. I never touched it." She stepped back, tears breaking free, her voice cracking apart. "Ethan, please. Believe me, I didn't take anything. I swear." Ethan looked at her for a long time, an expression carved with pain and coldness, as if he needed to shield a heart that had already broken once. "I trusted you," he said softly, a knife hidden in the words. "And you betrayed that trust?" "No, you're wrong. Ethan, please, get out of my house, now, or I'll call the police." 2 guards stepped forward. Natalie cried out, trying to hold Liam one last time, but she was pulled away. The door flung open. Rain slapped her face like the cruel hand of fate. "Mama! Mama!" Liam's scream tore through the mansion. Ethan flinched, but it was too late. The door slammed shut, burying Natalie beneath merciless rain. After Natalie was forced out of the mansion, Hawthorne Ridge returned to its usual silence. But it was not peace. It was an emptiness, thick and cold, settling over everything like fog, clinging to the trees. In the nursery, Liam lay motionless, his eyes half open, yet hollow, like a frozen winter lake. Ethan sat beside the bed, trying to coax him, pleading softly, repeating everything Natalie used to do. But whenever a spoon approached his lips, Liam turned away. No crying, no resistance, just silence, absolute, frightening silence. For 2 full days the child barely ate anything. He refused water. Each passing hour made him smaller, weaker, his breath thinner, his lips turning pale. On the 3rd evening, when Ethan touched his son's forehead, his heart stopped. Liam's skin was blisteringly hot. "Liam, what's wrong, sweetheart?" Ethan's voice cracked as he lifted the boy, feeling how frighteningly light he had become. Liam let out a faint whimper, so weak it was almost imaginary. Panic surged through Ethan. He rushed out of the room, shouting for help. 5 minutes later, Dr. Keller arrived with his medical bag. He quickly checked the boy's pulse, breath, skin temperature. His expression changed instantly. Pulse is very weak, dangerously high fever. Lips completely dehydrated, he murmured, then looked directly at Ethan with a gravity that cut straight into him. The boy is shutting down. What do you mean? Ethan gasped. Why? I've done everything. No, Dr. Keller interrupted, his voice low. This is not just illness. This is what happens when an infant loses the person he's bonded with most. Liam is giving up. Ethan froze. I don't understand. He's chosen not to eat, not to drink. He doesn't want to continue. Dr. Keller tightened his grip on his medical bag. I must be blunt. At this rate, Liam won't survive the next few hours. Ethan staggered, as if someone had torn the floor out from under him. The words cut deeper than any blade. Tell me what to do. Please, tell me. Dr. Keller looked him straight in the eyes, delivering the final blow. Bring Natalie back, the caregiver he's bonded with. Without her, the child will die. The mansion was suffocating with tension. After Dr. Keller left to gather emergency equipment, Ethan sat frozen on the staircase, his head in his hands, breath ragged. Everything inside him collapsed at once, the fear of losing his son, the pain he'd been avoiding, and the image of Natalie being dragged away in the rain, her desperate eyes fixed only on Liam. At the end of the hall, Mrs. Thompson stood silently, her eyes rimmed red. She had seen enough to know something felt wrong. Deeply wrong. She turned to a young security guard reviewing the night logs. Bring me the footage from last night, she said, her voice cracked. All of it, first floor and staff hallway. The guard blinked but obeyed. 10 minutes later, he rushed back, breathless. Mrs. Thompson, you need to see this. On the small screen, Veronica appeared clearly, walking into the staff area at midnight, glancing around, opening Natalie's worn canvas bag and dropping a small, gleaming object inside. The watch. Mrs. Thompson's hand fell, her breath catching painfully. She steadied herself, then hurried down the hall. "Ethan!" she cried, voice breaking. "You need to see this!" Just one short video, but it shattered the lie and ignited a burning rage in Ethan's eyes. He stood, trembling with fury, with guilt, with self-loathing. Without hesitation, he stormed into the living room where Veronica sipped wine as if the world bowed to her. "Get out of my house," Ethan said. His voice was so low and cold it could split glass. Veronica laughed. "Ethan, darling, you must be—" "You framed Natalie," he snapped, throwing the phone onto the table. "You almost killed my son." When she saw the footage, the color drained from her face. Before she could speak, Ethan pointed at the door. "I don't want to see you for another second." The door slammed behind Veronica, and Ethan didn't waste a single breath. He ran to his car and sped into the storm, rain slashing the windshield, streetlights smearing into streaks of yellow. Only one thought pounded through him. Find her. Save Liam. He stopped in front of the rundown building Natalie called home, a place patched together by rust and rain. Ethan ran up the stairs and pounded the door until his knuckles stung. The door opened. Natalie stood there, damp, trembling, her eyes still marked by old tears. Ethan couldn't speak for a moment. Then he dropped to his knees. "Please." His voice cracked apart. "Liam, he's dying. He won't survive without you." Natalie froze, her lips trembling. What did you say?" "Please," Ethan whispered, eyes burning red. "Save my son. Save him." No more words were needed. Natalie bolted back inside, grabbed her coat, and raced down the stairs behind him, her heartbeat pounding with fear and instinct. "Liam! Hold on! I'm coming!" Natalie nearly leapt out of the car before Ethan could even turn off the engine. She ran into the mansion, her heartbeat pounding so hard it felt like it was trying to reach Liam ahead of her. The air inside was suffocatingly cold. Dr. Keller stood by the crib, his face drained. "His heartbeat is dropping fast. I don't know how much time is left." Liam lay there, tiny as a torn scrap of paper caught in the wind, his breath so faint Natalie only saw them when his chest shuddered once and went still again. Ethan stepped back, hands trembling over his face. Natalie didn't. She walked forward, her legs moving as if they already knew where to go. "Liam, sweetheart, can you hear me?" Her voice cracked, soft as the last warmth left in that frozen room. She lifted him, pressed him to her chest, pulling him exactly where her frantic heart was beating. "Don't leave me. Not today. Not like this." Tears fell on his forehead, soaking his fine baby hair. She began to sing, a lullaby he'd heard on rare, peaceful days. Her voice shook on the edge of breaking, yet wrapped around him with a tenderness stronger than any medicine. No one dared move. Even Ethan held his breath, staring at that fragile moment as if watching the line between life and death flicker. Then Liam's small body twitched. A deeper breath broke from him, fragile but fighting its way back. His chest lifted, then fell, and lifted again. His eyelids trembled, opening slightly. His unfocused gaze searched, then found the only face he wanted. "Ma." The sound was so soft it almost dissolved in the air, but Natalie burst into tears, holding him tighter. Ethan fell to his knees, crying with relief. Liam came back to life in her arms, and the entire mansion seemed to breathe again after 3 days of silence. The mansion, once cold, felt quiet in a different way now, not the silence of despair, but the stillness of a morning after a storm. Liam slept in Natalie's arms, his breath warm and steady, his cheeks tinted pink as if he had never stood at the edge of death just hours earlier. Natalie sat in the kitchen's armchair, the warm yellow light wrapping her and the child in a gentle halo. Her hair was still damp, her clothes smelled of rain, yet her face held a serenity Ethan had never seen in anyone. He stood there for several seconds, quietly watching them, the woman who had saved his son, and the child he thought he had lost forever. "Natalie?" Ethan called softly, as if afraid to shatter the fragile moment. She lifted her head, eyes still red but softening at the sight of him. "I want to thank you," Ethan said, his voice low and so sincere that even he seemed surprised by it. "Not just for saving Liam, but for saving me. I've been wrong in so many ways." Natalie gently shook her head. "I don't need an apology. I just need Liam to be okay." Ethan stepped closer, sitting across from her. His gaze wandered to his son, then returned to her, slow, meaningful. "Liam needs you here," he said, without command or authority, only a father clinging to the most precious thing in his life. "And I think I do too." A faint shyness crossed her features. She looked down at Liam, his tiny hand still gripping her shirt, even in sleep. A small smile formed on her lips, warm and bashful, yet no longer hesitant. "If you truly want me to stay, I'll stay for Liam," she whispered. But her voice carried something more. Ethan couldn't hide his smile, rare, genuine, making him look years younger. He nodded, softly but firmly. Outside, the long rain finally came to an end. Droplets on the window reflected the warm kitchen light, like tiny flames marking the beginning of something new. In that kitchen, there were no grand declarations, no vows, only the warm breath of a child, the grateful eyes of a man, and the gentle smile of the woman they were both beginning to call home. A new family began at that very moment.